Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Right now, when I'm hitting record, right when I hit recording in progress, you take a drink. Okay. Now don't choke. Don't choke. Don't choke live on air.
Spit it out. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that's a good way to start.
Yeah, that was scary. I thought you were gonna drown. And we're on Zoom, Shawna. I can't help.
You would not have gotten to me in time, Dan.
Oh man.
Oh well. I don't think you would have made it. I too like my puns intended, by the way.
Yes.
Just saying.
It's my writing shirt.
Okay, so you've got a writing shirt and a writing jacket, and you looked very spiffy on Sunday. And it's Muse Day. So
it is.
So many good things happening.
Yes.
I almost drowned myself with my seltzer water. And we're going to talk about your sermon. This is what I love, Dan. You go away on vacation and you come back. I do love that. But when you come back, we put you right to work and get up there on that stage.
No rest. Yeah. Man, I worked hard too. I'm still not fully recovered.
Not only did you work hard, but what were you doing right before your sermon started? Because you weren't on the stage, and then we see you kind of at the last minute hop up there.
Yeah. Well,
where were you?
So I had to ask Mary a question, and I think I don't remember what the question was now. But also they bring the stool up there so that Greg can put his cup of water next to him. Mm-hmm. But I hydrate before I go up there. I don't need the stool. And I worry that I'm going to trip over the stool and fall off the stage. And so, because sometimes, I'll be honest with you, I get really in my head. And I lose track of my surroundings, and that's why I stopped. And this is funny, but it's true. It's also why I stopped riding a motorcycle, because I daydream too much. I get into my head, and then all of a sudden there's a semi in front of me or whatever. Yeah. So at some point I realized that this is not safe for me. So I gotta
not a good combo. Not a good combo. Right. I feel like I have heard this statement from your mouth before that you have quit riding a motorcycle, and my brain goes to, why on earth did Dan Kent ever ride a motorcycle? Like, I'm thinking about you as a little boy on your bike and the tricks you would do and flying over hoods of cars and stuff, and I'm like, that should not be on a motorized version of that.
Yeah, I would never do that. I would never do that on a motorcycle. I was a safe motorcyclist, but you have to understand, when you have, an eagle is you identify with eagles and you identify with hawks, then you need the wind. You need the wind.
You're so ridiculous. All right. Well, hey, he's not Hawkeye, although he looks like him. I'm going to say welcome to the MuseCast and happy Muse Day. And he's Dan Kent and I am Shawna Boren, and we are thankful for the safety that Dan has shown in his life, the wisdom to no longer ride motorcycles, to stay focused, to stay grounded, even though the wind beckons him.
That's right, it does. Yeah. Well, yeah. But Barbara and I saw this statue, and it was this eagle flying, and it was carrying this American flag with it. And it was, I don't know why I find that funny. I do. Like an eagle cares. Like an eagle identifies with a nation. It's just, anyway.
It's only American, Dan.
Right.
Eagles are only American.
Yeah. I think you can tell I'm a little burnt out from doing my hard week, because I'm distractible. So
it's okay. I'll get us there. We'll get there. How about we get there now? How about we dive into the good stuff? Because listen, Dan Kent, Mary and I were talking after service, and this is a very high compliment, where we both said Dan Kent can take something that is going to seem like nothing or not much of something and turn it into something pretty significant and big, and you're like, oh my gosh, now I got to deal with this and process this. So I knew what you were going to talk about. Of course, I'm a part of that team that we're on. And I just thought, oh, I'll be fine. I no skin off my back. Easy peasy. And of course, that's not the way that happened because that's a part of your gift. That's a part of how God uses you. Take something that I just feel like I'm good. And then you start unraveling and showing different layers to stuff. And I'm like, daggone it. I got to deal with this now too. So that's a high compliment. I hope you understand that.
Yes.
I'm excited to hear your summary. I know we got in a pretty vulnerable question. I wanted to dig in a little deeper with something you said that I'm just like, oh, that was so good with you. So yeah, we've got a few things to do today, but we can't get to any of that until we get your summary.
Summary. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So this sermon is called Inner Exodus. And originally I was going to call it Personal Exodus. And the last time that I did a sermon on fasting, that's what I wanted to call it. But it was in this series and we ended up calling it something else. But you and I both thought that Personal Exodus would have been better. And then as I was working on this, I felt like inner was more accurate than personal. So it's called Inner Exodus, and that's way more explanation for the title than I need, but there you have it. That's where we're at right now in this show. So the point of the sermon is that we're in this series called Wholehearted, and it's about the disciplines, and there's a lot of different disciplines, and we're not going to cover even we're going to cover a small part of them, but in addition to the disciplines, we also wanted to talk about these four directions of love. Love of God, love of other, love of self, love of creation and the animal kingdom, and so forth. And so for my week, I get love of self, and which is sort of a strange thing to talk about because we tend to focus on loving others and, Good Samaritan, turn the other cheek, all that kind of stuff. And so I originally didn't know exactly what I wanted to talk about that part of it, but I knew that I was going to get to this discipline on fasting, and it turned out that really I felt like fasting was, out of all of the different things that I found about love of self, fasting I felt had the biggest potential impact, and so I saw it that way largely because we're coming out of the series on Revelation. And the series of Revelation, of course, what we're assuming is that Revelation reveals that we have all been living under a deception. Revelation is an unveiling of the reality of our situation, that things are not the way that God wants them to be, and that this world is still held hostage by an enemy of God. And from that context, then, looking at our situation, that means that God is rescuing from this hostile, foreign sort of place. And so to me, that reminds me of the original Exodus story, where you have Israel, that they were enslaved for over 400 years, and they were finally freed, and they, escaped Egypt through the Red Sea, and then they ended up wandering the desert for 40 years, even though they were just an eagle's flight from the Promised Land, and it could have taken them 2 weeks to get there, but it took them 40 years. And why is that? And I argue that they, even though they were out of Egypt, they still had Egypt in their heart, and God was doing some work in the desert there to free them on the inside. And so what I argue is, even though in Jesus we have been liberated from this hostile place, we still have Egypt or Babylon or the beast in our heart, and it's like in our blood even. And to kind of show one example of that, I talk about something called hedonic adaptation, which is a fancy way of saying that we get used to pleasure. And so I shared an example of a potato where, if you just have a potato, you could have a great potato and it would be on a scale of 0 to 100, it'd be a 40. But as soon as you run into somebody who starts putting salt and butter and sour cream and cheese and bacon bits and all sorts of stuff on it, well, that potato tastes like a 90. And as soon as you taste that potato, your potato is no longer a 40. It actually goes down in pleasurability. And so our palates get manipulated by these foods. And then the other aspect of that is if you are the one who has the potato that is a 90 with all the stuff on it, if you have that same potato every day, it's not a 90 every day. You get used to it. That's the adaptation, and it becomes less and less pleasurable the more you have it. And that happens with all sorts of stuff, not just food. It happens with convenience, and our expectations are high, and so I propose that we get addicted to all of these things in Babylon because it messes with our neurotransmitters. It messes with our dopamine. It measures with our pleasure sensitivity. And we're no longer then sensitive to the good pleasures that God has for us in their normal state. They feel dull and boring to us. And what a great way for the enemy to make God dull to us is to just absolutely jack with our pleasure sensitivity. The antidote to that, I argue, is fasting. When you fast from things, it allows your pleasure sensitivity to readjust, and you reclaim the ability to sense pleasure again the way it is supposed to be sensed. And I think in this world we all sort of end up kind of being drawn. It's like a gravity toward more pleasurable stuff. And so I think fasting on a regular basis allows us to remain sensitive to the best of our ability to the good things that God has for us. And then I just close the sermon out with a note about how, every, the way I phrased it is that every captivity, between every captivity and promised land there is a desert, and between every dependency and every independence there is a desert. And so when we go from being conformed to the pattern of this world to a renewed mind, we have to pass through a desert. And that is what God calls us to. God promises to meet us there. We're promised to have the Spirit in that desert, and we're also promised that there is a promised land, and God is waiting for us on the other side. And so that was kind of the gist of my sermon. There was a bunch of other stuff in there as well, but that's sort of the heart of it. And it's weird, like, it was my 41st sermon. And I only know that because I have it on. I have my sermons on my website, and so I know that this is the 41st. I knew that at some point as a pastor here, I would repeat a sermon where I would talk about something that I'd already talked about. I never would have guessed that fasting would have been the thing that I repeated. But I tell you what, it's something that I'm really glad because I need the reminder. I need the reminder of how this game works, and you gotta fight back. And so that is my summary. What did you think?
Thank you, Dan Kent. Good job on that summary and good job on the sermon. I actually remembered, not until you were talking, but I did remember, oh, Dan, you had taught on fasting before. And parts of that were coming back to me. And then I remembered, oh yeah, he got me there too. He got me back there and now he's getting me here. So I should have known. No, okay. So I really appreciated the approach that you took because I feel like when people hear fasting, they do think of, Jesus going out to the wilderness for 40 days and these big extreme things. And it is that, but you also talked about how there are many things that we can fast from. And it's just the act of reclaiming that true pleasure that God provides for us and allowing us to remain sensitive to the things of God in a variety of ways. And so, and I forget how you said it, but it's not denying
Yeah.
yourself, but it's actually, how did you say that?
Well, I think I said it a few different ways, but I just said
Yeah.
fasting is not anti-pleasure. It's
Yes.
pro-pleasure because it
Pro-pleasure.
makes us sensitive to pleasure again.
Yeah.
It's the corporations and the system that keeps jacking with our food, that keeps numbing us to pleasure.
Hmm.
That's what's anti-pleasure. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just thought that is so true. And that goes for so much more than food, but food is a great tangible example. And the potato I thought was a great example. It made me think of, and you did talk about our joint little pleasure that we enjoy, which is the peanut M&Ms.
Right.
So I've always liked popcorn, but then, you discover movie popcorn and like, oh my goodness. And then you discover, oh, movie popcorn with that butter on it, which I'm sure it's totally healthy. I'm sure it's doing
Right.
wonders for my innards. But not only that, and then so you think, oh, that's really good. But then you discover, ooh, they can layer that popcorn. Like you could have them put some popcorn in and then put some butter, layer the butter, put the butter, and then a little bit more popcorn and a little more butter, and then wow, and then that's a whole nother thing. And then you can like do some salt, and then you could do buttered salt, and oh my goodness! And then you discover in college I was introduced to peanut M&Ms within my popcorn. So the
Wow.
peanut M&Ms and the butter and the salt and the popcorn, and it was just this glorious thing.
Yeah.
And I still enjoy it. Of course, it's not the healthiest thing in the world. I don't enjoy it as much as that first time.
Yeah.
It was just so it was like a flavor explosion in my that I love. But that I feel like that's what I thought of when we were talking about the potato and just talking about how we just get desensitized to things, and that's the point. And so reclaiming that, taking that back, I just thought was great. And so I was super thankful for it. I loved that you took it back to the Exodus story because man, oh man, how real is that? And they were free, but they still needed freedom because they were living with that bondage still within them. And it's the same for us today. We are free, but we still have Babylon and the beast in our hearts, and we feed that beast in ways that we're unaware of. And so fasting helps us to kind of wake up to that. It's a discipline that helps us wake up to that and grow closer to the Lord and love ourselves, because until we do that, I don't know that we can love others well. So
Yeah.
good
That's right.
job, you.
Man, well, and that's a good summary also. I mean, that could have been the summary right there. That's awesome.
That is not my gift, sir. I will leave that to you and whatever guest host I trick into being on here with me when you're not here. Okay, you in your sermon, but also in your summary, talked about the need to go into the desert, and that has just been sticking with me. And so I'm not saying you have to like super expound on it, but I would love for you to just to unpack that a little bit more. I also want to give you an opportunity to expound more on anything that you didn't have time for, or something that maybe you didn't get to say because of our time constraints during the service. And so, and then we'll get to that one question that we did get sent in, or that vulnerable post that we got sent in to talk about. So, but first, so that's the way it's going to go. First, I would love for you to unpack that idea of we need to go into the desert in order to get to the promise, but God will meet us there in the midst of it. Like he's not just waiting for us on the other side. He's meeting us in the midst. That was so good, Dan Kent. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's not, it's one of those things where it's not like super profound, other than to say that, like one example I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I was told that native tribes in like the rainforest, when they would capture monkeys, they would capture monkeys by putting a banana in a cage, and the monkey would reach in and grab the banana, and then he couldn't get the banana out because of the bars, and he refused to let go, and so that's how they would come and then catch the monkey. And I think that's how I think of it. I think of it as like we can be outside of the cage, but if we're still clinging to something inside of there, we have to let that go. And there's a reason why we cling to these things, because first of all, they're pleasurable, and that's true. But I think when we fast, we start to realize that there's more to it than just pleasure. Those pleasures a lot of times will mask insecurities and fears and traumas and stuff like that. And when we don't have that pleasure, now we have to deal with those things, and so we run back and grab those things again. But you can't go into the promised land if you're still holding on to Babylon. I mean, you have to let that stuff go. You can't bring that stuff with. And so that means that you have to go through this period where you're just there with yourself and all of your insecurities and all of your anxieties and all of your fears and traumas and all of that, and you don't have any of those crutches, and that is the desert, and finding yourself there, and overcoming those urges, and that's what the desert is. And um I guess that's probably pretty much it. It's not much. There is one other thing I was going to say about it, but yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to disagree with you ever so slightly and say I think it is profound because I think they're terrified of the desert. They don't want to
Mhm.
face that stuff. They don't. And I just love that you said you got to go there, but guess what? God's going to meet you there. And so, yeah, with all of your stuff, all your insecurities, all the things that you need to let go of, that it can feel like a very dry place, but we're not left there. Um, Sometimes we're left there longer than we like, i.e.,
Mhm.
the Israelites, roaming about for a while. But God does meet us there and He is guiding us out. He's revealing truth to us so that we can continue to let go of the lies and He's guiding us out. So,
Yeah.
not a full on disagreement, but I will
Yeah.
just say I do think it is. I do think, I think it's profound and
Yeah.
give yourself credit for saying something.
Well.
Oh my goodness. All right. What did you have to
Oh,
leave out or
no, I left.
what did
Yeah.
you wish you had more time for?
Yeah, you would not believe it. I had these
I know.
delusions. I had
I
these
know.
delusions of grandeur. I just thought, well, I could talk about this, and then I'll talk about this, and then I'll
I
talk about
know.
this, and it's like, oh, jeepers.
Last week when we were kind of running through it, I was like, oh, so this is like a mini series within a
Yeah.
series. How many weeks is this going to go? Because there's so
Yeah.
many directions.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just say that I do want. I hope that we come back to do a series on this, and I've
Mhm.
proposed that to the team, and because I think that there's a lot to talk about here. I was gonna just so then I first of all I had like four sections of this sermon, and then I realized I didn't even get through section one, and I was running out of time. So I'm like, okay, I just got to do the most important thing, but I still want to tell people about these other things. So then I just had this little, I was gonna go this way, but then I didn't. I was gonna go this way, and then I didn't, and I did that for each of those things, and I still ran out of time. So I had to get rid of all of that and just jump to the point, which is the right way to do it. But I think that there's other really important things to talk about when we talk about love of self. And the first
Mm,
thing is I think that it's important to realize what the self is in terms of its standing in reality, because in the world we hear one of two things, that a human, as a person, you are fundamentally bad or you are fundamentally good. And I think that both of those are wrong. I don't think that that's an accurate portrayal of what we are. And you can't really love yourself in a holy way if you have a broken understanding of the self that you're supposed to love. And so, what I argue is that we are neither fundamentally bad nor fundamentally good. We are fundamentally loved by God, and once you realize that we are loved by God fundamentally, that goodness and badness is this extra thing that's in our lap. Well, now suddenly I am justified in my love of self because God loves me with this unsurpassable love. And like Greg said last week, everything we do is done in response to what God has done for us, and He has loved us with an unsurpassable love, and therefore we are justified to love ourselves. And so that was the first kind of thing that I wanted to talk about. The second thing is I think we have to look at ourselves the way that God looks at us as we are trying to become all that God wants us to be. And what I see is I see people, when they see what God is calling us to, they can respond with despair or they respond with perfectionism. And one of them is sort of throw your hands up. The other one is sort of like, run at it, but in an obsessive sort of way. And what I argue is that God does call us to a high standard, but he does so with compassion and mercy and understanding. And so, like, my favorite passage is Matthew 9:36. Matthew says Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And I just, that sticks with me so much because that's how Jesus and God look at us, with compassion. They know that it's hard. Life is hard. Their calling is high. Our standard that we're going for is high. And God's not going to compromise, but he's also not a jerk. He's compassionate and merciful. And so I thought that that was also really important. And then the other thing that I really want to talk about is, two more things. I think that one of the ways that we don't realize that we are anti-loving ourselves is that we give in to our hurry. Everybody's in a hurry and everybody's running out of time. And a way that we can love ourselves is to eliminate hurry from our lives, which is easy, way easier said than done. But I just got done reading John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and I just think he has some good points there. And it originally comes from Dallas Willard, and I'm a big Dallas Willard guy. So, and then the final thing that I wanted to talk about at some point is I think that we have a harder time loving ourselves than we do loving others. And like, for instance, you look at most people, they take much better care of their pets than they do for themselves. They give their pets healthy food and they feed them on a regular schedule and they don't overfeed them, and they take them out to exercise and they give them lots of affection, and they don't treat themselves with that type of goodness and care and love. And that's true too. You hear people who will, they'll smoke like a chimney, but as soon as they have a grandkid, now suddenly they try to stop smoking because they want to see their grandkid grow up. And so we'll do things for others that we won't even do for ourselves. And I think it's interesting that Paul makes a very vivid note that you are not your own. You are God's precious belonging. You are on loan from God, and so loving yourself is like loving another. How you treat yourself is how you treat God's precious possession. And I think that for a lot of people could be a good reframe. And so those are some of the ideas that I would like to put in a series down the road. I'm an absolute madman. I'm an eagle carrying an American flag, thinking that I could do all of this in one sermon. Absolute insanity.
I mean, if we would have done a marathon, like they used to do those televised marathons, like 24 hours, we could have done it. We could have got it all in there. But man, I agree with you. I think a future series would be a good idea. I love these other points that you brought up, in particular that final one about we'll do for others that we won't do for it. That's just so true and so fascinating. So I look forward to the series coming up at some point. Okay, we got in a comment, a query, a lament about fasting from one of our MuseCast peeps out in the community. And so I don't want to read the whole thing. And so however you want to expound on it, please feel free to do so. But basically, they were saying that, in all honesty, they have a hard time embracing the discipline of fasting. They feel like it is related to the problem of evil, but essentially it's this: why would God create us in such a way that our appetites far exceed what is necessary to fulfill our basic needs? I know there's some other explanations and exposition there about but I think that's the basic question. So I wanted to give you some space to respond to that and elaborate on it however you see fit. And don't ask me to respond because I don't know. I think it's a great question. I'm waiting to hear your answer. So.
Yeah. Well, it is a really great question. I absolutely agree with that. And the first thing I would say is, why would God make us with an appetite that exceeds, whatever? I mean, that just assumes that everything is the way that God wants it. And that's not my theology. I do not assume that everything is the way that God wants it. I think that everything is, in fact, I would say, not the way that God wants it. He saw creation, he saw how wicked people had become, and he regretted making humanity. It says in Genesis 6:4, and so right away, I say, this is not the way that God wanted it to go. Now, it was a potential way that it could go, and God knew that it was possible that it would go that way, but he was surprised that it did. And that's how I read Genesis 6. Okay, so then, why would he even make us with that potential? And here's, I just think that, I go back to the principle of proportionality. Our capacity for good is roughly equal to our capacity for bad. And there is this potential that we can become all gluttonous and whatever, but there is also this potential that we can get control over those impulses and live in a healthy way, in a way that's autonomous, where we have control over ourselves. It doesn't mean anything to have control over yourselves if there's nothing tempting, if there's nothing challenging, if there's no potential indulgence. If you put if you put padding on all of the stairs, and you put all of the knives in the drawers are Nerf knives, which I don't know if there's a Nerf knife, but you can't. Of course, you're going to be safe. That's not surprising. You're not learning anything in that situation, and so I think that ultimately the potential for self-harm through like these types of things, I think it's related to the fact that God wants us to be autonomous. He wants us to learn lessons. He wants us to do things, and we're going to fall, we're going to screw up, but he wants us to actually learn. And because he doesn't want to hold our hand. He doesn't want to. He might want to hold our hand. I mean, that's a nice thought, but he doesn't want to just always have to protect us from everything. He wants us to grow in wisdom. He wants us to be able to do it for ourselves. I think of the Deuteronomy passage where, the Israelites are just complaining to Moses about how the expectations, it's too hard, and maybe God will do it for us. And Moses just says, no, it's not too hard. It's not on the other side of the Red Sea. It's not up in heaven. You don't have to wait for somebody to come down from the heavens to do it for you. It is there in your mouth. It is there in your heart. You can live these things. You can do this, and it's not easy, but you can. And I think from the principle of proportionality, that's part of the greatness of being a child of God, is that God doesn't think low of us. He has a high expectation for us. He has a high standard for us, and that's, I think, validates how great he has created us with the potential to meet these high standards. And but no, it's not easy, and we screw up, and no, we're not perfect, and I think that he would rather had us learn these things in the garden when he was walking around with us, but because of the fall, we have to learn this the hard way. And that's a sort of an ambiguous response, but I think the answer is related to those types of dynamics, and that's how I, in my mind, answer some of those questions. But it's a really, really great question for sure.
Great question, and I will give you, the Friedman, permission if you want to dialogue with this person further via email to do that.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Dan Kent, one question I didn't plan on asking you, but then I was reminded, and I wanted to ask you, the manna jokes, were those off the cuff? Were those in the moment? Were those planned? Because we had some real ones there.
I had like 25 years ago, 25 years ago, I made this cartoon. I used to think that I was going to be a cartoonist, and I was, like a Far Side or, something like that. And so I had these Bible cartoons basically, and one of them was this Israelite was checking the menu, and there's this month all laid out, and each day there was a different food. And the only ones I remember are Manaroni and cheese, Manna Surprise, banana bread, and manifold, Manicotti. That was a good one.
Oh my
And
gosh.
what was the other one? Manatee. That was good. But yeah, so I was drawing from an old cartoon, and I feel like I picked the two best ones that were on
Yeah.
it. But yeah.
Yeah. Banana bread. Okay, sorry. I'm thinking about it again. Oh, that was good stuff. Dan Kent, is there anything else of substance? Because
Yeah.
this was not it. I apologize. Is there anything else of substance that you'd like to say before we get to nugget time? Because I don't want to end this show talking about banana.
I think we got to just go to nugget time and see what we can do there.
Okay, maybe we can recover it there. I just can't. All right. Ooh, Dan Kent, do you know what time it is?
It is nugget time. Woo!
Oh my goodness.
Hey,
Oh.
I hope you appreciated the Taylor Swift shout out too. I was
I
thinking of you.
I did. But then you said something of like, you talked about a bunch of young girls screaming, and then you're like, said something about it's dangerous or we need to be safe from that. Or I forget your next sentence, but I was like,
Oh.
hold on, sir.
I don't remember that.
We're just fine over here. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
I appreciated it very
Good.
much. Nice little shout out. Do you want a nugget first or nugget last?
I'll go first. I don't really have anything. So maybe you should go first.
You have
I think you should go first.
No, yeah, because mine, gosh, I feel like I've with the nuggets, they're supposed to be like nice little bows that we put on the end of our conversation, but I feel like it's almost a whole nother conversation. So I'm just going to go with it because when I was thinking about your sermon and just your challenge to not continue to feed the beast, and to not feed the Babylon that's in our hearts, I just was reflecting on how that's played out in my life. And I think before even realizing it, I naturally was practicing targeted fasts because my birth mother was prone to various addictions, and I kind of felt like there could be some propensities in me for some of that. And so anything, and then I'm not talking heinous big things. I'm just saying anything that I felt like I was looking forward to too much, or I was relying on too much, or I just felt like, at the end of a hard day, I just really wanted, I have intentionally tried to like slow down on some of that stuff. Even something like chips and salsa, which I love. If I feel like I'm loving it too much, like it's become too big, too important, which I know sounds silly, but it can. Come on.
Yeah.
Then I'll abstain from that for a bit just because I don't want anything to have a grip. I don't want anything to have a hold. And so that is something that I just kind of instinctively did as a result of not wanting to emulate a person in my life. But then I started to like talk myself out of it and be like, oh, that's silly, Shawna. That's not. But what your sermon did for me was help me to see, no, that's actually a good discipline. It's a way of ensuring that I am truly focused on the pleasures that God provides and the relief that God provides and the stress reliever that God provides instead of like feeding myself whatever it could be. And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that because fasting is an antidote. It is an antidote to so many things. And something that I kind of just pushed aside and thought that was silly. I'm coming back to realizing, no, that's actually a positive and a good thing. And so my question that I'm now asking myself again is, in what ways am I feeding the beast? In what ways am I relying on self-soothing, all that stuff? How am I feeding myself instead of looking to the source that could truly help in whatever given situation?
Yeah.
Again, not nice and neat, but that's just kind of what's been rolling around my brain since your sermon.
Yeah. That's really good. In fact, it's funny because like Barbara has these particular potato chips and this particular
Mhm.
dip that she just loses her mind over. And
Mhm.
Cedric too. Remember Cedric was talking about how
Yes.
potato chips are just like he goes crazy about them.
There's
Barbara's
something.
stepmom, who used to be a nun, she was with Barbara's dad one time, and she opened a bag of chips and she looked down, the whole family-sized bag was gone. She didn't even realize that she was eating it nonstop. And so she told herself, I'm done with chips. I'm never going to have a potato chip again. And because of that same thing. And she has, held to that. She's like, nope, no
Yeah.
chips for me. I don't have any control over it. So I think that's
Yeah.
that's really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I just like there are so many things that alter our moods, and I'm not even like okay, I'm not even talking about like drugs, alcohol. I'm just saying like a good bag of potato chips, a bowl of
Yeah.
popcorn with peanut M&Ms, social media, a TV. Like there are things that we just kind of feast on, and it's that dopamine versus serotonin stuff. It's
Yeah.
it's it's not real, and so to rely on that stuff, I
Yeah.
think that's part of what you were saying. We got to wake up to that.
Yeah. I'll just say one more thing before my nugget. And that is, you know, the, it's really easy to talk about these things and make it sound like, well, can't I take a hot, relaxing bath every once in a while? Or can't I have a bag of
Right,
chips every
right.
once in a while? And
Yeah.
of course you
Yeah,
can. I mean, yes,
for
yes,
sure.
please. Yeah. And it's just a matter of, like you had said, it's like, does it have control over you instead of the other way around? And that will lead to my nugget then. And I'll just say that that compassion piece, look at yourself the way that Jesus looks at you
Mm,
with compassion and mercy, because
hmm.
I know, especially when it comes to food, there are so many psychological, life history, trauma stuff related to food. And, when I worked on the geriatric unit, you could kind of tell how old people were just by how they treated their food, because you could tell the people who had survived the depression, because they would not leave anything on their plate, and they would make sure that the condiment rack was in their purse, and like nothing was left behind that could be used for later, and there is a trauma there, and that's going to affect your sense of safety and your sense of need for things, and that's tough stuff to work through. And working on the kids unit too, you could tell the kids who were living in poverty, because you would go to their room and they would have little things from the last 7 meals hidden behind pillows and behind their socks, and you'd find like a carton of milk and a thing of crackers, and because they never know when they might need food, and they can never trust that food is going to appear. And man, those are some really deep traumas to overcome. And those are just like a couple examples. We all have stuff like that. And so like I said before, God's calling us to a high standard. He wants the best. He wants us to be free from Babylon. But he also knows that we are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and he has compassion on us. And we need to do this with that same spirit of compassion. Whatever we are able to do, we need to do that with compassion. That
I
is
love
my
it.
nugget.
Beautiful. It is so beautiful. And I'm going to break the nugget rule by commenting on your
Good.
nugget.
I
But
did.
but yeah,
So
well, I know, but this is the end. So it just remind what you're just saying. That is so big and so huge and so important. I'm going to say again, profound, but it also reminds me of something else that you've shared before about in the scripture where Jesus looks on the folks with compassion and just says, what do you want me to do for you? Like
yeah,
he is there and he's ready to help us and to meet whatever the need is, whatever the void is, he's ready to fill it. And we just so many times are looking to other things and places and people to fill something that he is just here, ready, waiting to fill for us. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Did the production team get the high five cam ready?
I think so.
Okay, because I feel like we need a MuseCast high five for
All
the
right.
awesome job that you did on the sermon and on the show today. So whenever you're ready,
I'm ready.
MuseCast high five.
High five. All right.
Got it. Okay. We are so high tech here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, for your sermon, for your time. I hope you can get some rest. Hopefully you've got nothing else going on and you can get some rest and recover
you know what?
from
I'm going to
that.
watch a movie tonight.
I love it. Perfect. That sounds good. If folks want to send in questions, comments, where do they do that? Perfect.
Okay.
MuseCast@whchurch.org. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions, your feedback, your comments, your engagement. It is really cool to interact with you guys in that way. We'll see you on YouTube in the chat, 4 p.m. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week. Good job, Dan.
Thank you.